Owning the ocean. Water covers 70% of the Earth's surface in the form of oceans. Yet almost all of that vast amount of water is unaffected by well-defined property rights. In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the great voyages of discovery and the resulting seaborne empires in Europe necessitated internationally accepted rules on rights to use the ocean. These rights were first cataloged in the famous Mare Liberum of Hugo Grotius of Holland. He noted that the sea, since it is as incapable of being seized as the air, cannot have been attached to the possession of any particular nation. In the system that Grotius suggested that prevailed in international law for nearly 300 years. Each nation was to have exclusive rights to the use of the ocean within 3 miles of its shoreline, with that area to be called the territorial seas. The 3 mile distance was not picked at random. It was the distance that an early 17th century cannonball could carry. Beyond the 3 mile limit, Grotius urged that the high seas should be a common resource from which none save pirates could legitimately be excluded. Increasing use of the high seas in the early and mid 19th century led to the replacement of the doctrine of free use with that of reasonable use. After World War II, the increasing importance of shipping, fishing, offshore oil and gas deposits, and seabed mining caused the legal system of ocean rights to crumble. In 1945, President Truman announced that the United States exclusive rights to subaqueous organic resources such as oil and natural gas extended to the edge of the continental shelf or margin, an area that stretched 200 miles from the Atlantic coast of the United States. Other nations quickly made similar claims. Unlike these unilateral actions, attempts at international cooperation have achieved mixed results. To illustrate, when the when the Third United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, open capitals UNCLOS close, convened in 1973, there was widespread agreement that the territorial sea would be established at the 12-mile limit and that there should be an exclusive economic zone, largely but not completely controlled by the coastal state, stretching to 200 miles beyond the shoreline, the general extent of the continental shelf. There was not general agreement on what to do with property rights to the areas beyond this 200-mile limit, and it was the disposition of these areas that raised the really hard issues. The developed countries urged a private property rights based system of development whereas the developing countries offered a common property rights system. In the end, a compromise called the parallel system was agreed on. There would be both private development and a UN funded and UN operated company called the Enterprise. In order to give the enterprise the ability to compete with the more advanced countries of the developed world, an international seabed authority, open capitals ISA close, would be created to allocate rights to mine the oceans. The conference specified an ingenious variant of the I cut you choose method of cake cutting in order to allocate mining rights. Before it could begin operation, a private or state organization had to submit to the International Seabed Authority two prospective sites of operation. The authority would then choose one of those sites for later development by the enterprise and allow the applicant to proceed with the mining of the other. The United States refused to sign the final treaty, although 117 countries eventually signed it in December 1982. Over time, the U.S. objections to the missing provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea 3 have faded or been proven unfounded. The treaty went into effect in 1994. The United States has signed the treaty, but Congress has not ratified it. Question 5.17. In what ways do these historical developments respond to efficiency? And to what extent do they respond to political power and distribution? Question 5.18. Read the following account of the history of water law and discuss whether the law appears to have evolved toward economic efficiency. Water has always been one of the most valuable natural resources, but because it tends to run away, there have always been problems in defining and assigning property rights in water. Centuries ago in England, the general rule was that rights were vested in the riparian owner, that is, in the person who owned the land on the bank of the river. The riparian owner's principal right was to a flow of water past his land. It would be a violation of someone else's right for an upstream user to use the water that passed by his property in such a way as to reduce the flow to downstream users. The upstream user could not therefore divert so much of the water to his own use that the flow was significantly diminished for those downstream. A riparian was restricted in his ability to sell water to non-riparians, that is, people who do not own land along the water. However, in the 19th century, this legal arrangement had to be altered because uh, industrial demand on the natural flow of a river frequently exceeded the supply. In the eastern United States, These issues were resolved by elaborating the natural flow theory of water rights that had been adopted from the English common law. An alternative theory of water rights appeared in the western United States. Under the reasonable use theory, the riparian owner is entitled to use the water flow in any reasonable way. It was deemed reasonable for one owner to use all of the water in a stream or lake when others are making no use of it. Under the reasonable use theory, the riparian owner does not have a right to the natural water flow. Furthermore, a riparian owner may transfer rights to non-riparians.